All right, welcome officially to the celebration reading for Where the Wolf by Sally Rosen Kindred. Before Sally became my dear friend, I read and loved her poetry. Every time I encountered one of her poems, I found myself in awe, and I still do. Sally has a way of using language that feels startling at first, but then feels absolutely perfect, as if it were meant to be, and shouldn't have been a surprise at all. She uses such gorgeous imagery that even when she writes about painful subjects, she reveals moments of beauty that are all the more profound. Sally is the author of 2 previous poetry books, Book of Asters and No Eden, and 3 chapbooks, including Says the Forest to the Girl. And today we get to celebrate Sally's newest book, Where the Wolf, winner of the 2020 Diode Editions Book Prize. So please join me in welcoming Sally Rosen Kindred.
Thank you so much, Katie. Oh my gosh, that was an awesome introduction. Okay, the one thing about this event that I kept telling myself was don't cry, and I think I'm messing up in the first minute, but that's all right. I just want to welcome everybody who's come today. It's incredible, and obviously we have people from all over, which is wonderful. I'm so moved to see all of you here and so excited for the audience that get to hear these incredible guest readers. And about those guests, first of all, Katie, I want to thank you for making this event happen, and in some ways for making the poems happen. There was a word that Katie added in workshop to the first poem in this book. It's the poem First Night, and the wolf entered the yard, and thanks to Katie, it guarded the yard. And I've got to tell you, it changed the shape of the project, and I could not be more profoundly grateful to you, Katie, for those tiny moments, you know, between friends and writers where something is offered like that and has just changed everything. And speaking of you and all of the amazing guest readers today, I just want to thank all of you for being here and sharing your words with the audience. I'm going to be weird and quote Hillary Clinton, which is bizarre, and I never expected that to happen, but you know, life is full of surprises. Nobody ever says it takes a village to write a book. So I'm paraphrasing her, but I'm saying it because the guest readers here today are this book's village. You guys made this book happen, and I thank you. Most of you I met originally through the Glenn workshop, but beyond there, we went on to coffee shops and hotel rooms and restaurants and Zoom rooms. And you gave me the encouragement and the guidance, the wisdom necessary to see this one through. So I thank you for your inspiration, your feedback, your wise words, and your friendship so much. So we're going to be reading in 3 groups of 3, our guest readers, and I'll be introducing them 3 at a time. And in a minute, I will introduce our 3 first poets, and I'm so excited for all of you to get to hear them. I'm excited for me to get to hear them. This is like a dream. But first, I thought I would start us off with a wolf. So as I said, a wolf appears in the first poem in this book, and she, to my great fortune, lingers and winding her way through poems about daughters and mothers primarily. But this first poem is about her, the she-wolf, and it's called Is She? You think this is a poem where the wolf, the forest, after all, is a sleeve of glass daggers. You, the girl, cold throat, wet shoes. Wolf is the ghost of a hurt remembering itself. You can hear her between trees. You can see the ghost her mouth was, weaving wet fur in the shards. If the forest is an altar built in the crack of your lost one's femur, then this is the moment when the girl is you kneeling before it. Wolf says, the scarlet bird is the one with a scar in it. Wolf says, gather stones, will be the end of the story of the wolf moving slowly across the sentence you have been speaking since before you were born. You say what a stone says in the pocket of your dress and forget you were ever a wing. My dog is now barking and my cat is meowing. So I apologize for whatever's happening in my house right now. Now for our first three readers. We're going to start with Doe Overstreet, who is the author of Delicate Machinery Suspended, book right here, from TS Poetry Press. Ann and I met in 2005 in a workshop where her poems, voice, and imagery knocked me back, but I was too scared to talk to her. I'm really glad we worked through that, because a conversation with Ann about poems, fairy tales, theology, nice looking Scotsman over a cup of Earl Grey is my idea of heaven. Ann told me where the wolf was ready to go, and if she hadn't, it would still be cowering in a drawer. And for that and so much else, Ann, I thank you. Next, we'll hear from Todd Truffin, who is a poet and professor at Kimbol University, where I've had the privilege to visit a class of his and witness his thoughtful, warm teaching style, which is no surprise. I think our first workshop together, Todd, was in 2007, and his poems were full of memorable images and mood. In addition to his being a fine poet, what I want to say about Todd is what a kind, insightful, witty friend he is, and how good he looks in a Viking hat, and also how lucky I feel to know him. And last in this act, we'll hear from Devon Miller-Duggan, who is a poet and professor at the University of Delaware. Her most recent book is Slow Salute, winner of the Lithic Press Prize. Got everybody's books here, but I'm not going to be good at holding them up. She is a brilliant poet, reader, and teller of tales. I'm grateful for every hour I've spent with her in the Baltimore IKEA cafeteria, and there have been many, reading her poems, getting her glorious feedback, and receiving comfort in hard times. She's a ride or die friend. All right, Ann, you're up.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that it's a privilege and an honor to be able to read alongside Sally, and I'm just delighted to be here. I love how in Sally's poems, the elements of fairy tales can weave their Gothic fingers through the present, otherworldly and brambled. I especially love the wolf in all her iterations, how she blooms out from the lurker and the monster to become more, a guide or companion, trauma given voice, embodied, among other things. That sort of informed my selection of a poem to read. Alice has gone. Among toad lilies, Alice's shade flexes, tethered to the ground, momentarily caught by a root, but almost gone. One girl holds her hand up between her face and the sun, sees beneath the skin the shadow cast by the bone and muscles, a fracture of branches among leaves. It reminds her of a small brown bat wing. She does not know how dark set into her. Others move among Alice's things, looking for a clue, seeking why she left. Pages are turned, marginalia liberated from context. Some practice standing sidewise, thinning what light they can down to matchsticks. Incense summons the ghost of ash, but only that. No one knows how long a person can exist without a shadow, rooted like a noontime tree, untroubled by the weight.
Yes, I'm up. It's great to be here and celebrating Sally's new book. I've always been impressed with Sally's ability not just to retell or recast fairy stories and elements, but to write new ones. And that's always exciting. And I'm no less excited with this new one. The poem I'm going to read is somewhat connected to the wolf. As I entered my adult years, my mother would often tell me that I didn't get raised by my parents, that I raised myself, or when she didn't like what I was doing, that I was raised by wolves. And that over time led to this poem called Feral Child. You say I raised myself, a wild grown among you. When did I evolve past being cute and helpless? When I defeated Alpha, did self-preserving fear allow me to stay home? Are we so different that you believe you have taught me nothing at all? And have you, suspicious and afraid, learned nothing?
Hi, I'm Devon Miller-Duggan. I need to apologize if some of the more bluntly physical details in this poem are lack grace or are feral. But I had an interesting winter and this poem came out of it. I'm married scandalously to my history professor from my freshman and sophomore year of college. We have been married for 44 years. He almost never gets sick. And except for a slight tendency to cut his fingers when he's cooking, he doesn't have accidents either, except when he does. So 20 some years ago, he had a catastrophic staph infection that ended up in an epidural abscess, which is very rare and normally fatal. And he should have died, but he didn't. People all around the globe were praying. It's one of the reasons. The other ones are just who the heck knows. Then he had feral appendicitis that nearly took him out a couple of years after that. And then he hasn't been sick since then. And then this winter, right before Christmas, he fell backwards down the stairs and tore both of his quadricep tendons. People tear one, but they don't tear both. This was sufficiently extraordinary that the top orthopedic surgeon in the state got all excited about it and did surgery on Christmas Eve morning. So we went into the semester in a kind of an interesting place. We had PT coming to the house, but we did not have any other nursing care or any of the normal sort of superstructure of, yeah, holy smokes is right, that would go with this kind of thing. So of course I had to write a poem about it. Because anyway, it's called You Get Yourself Broken Again. Last time, your body let staff road trip through your every colony and byway before it set up camp down where the bottom of your spine called halt. And it curled up into a sleeping bag, what an abscess is, and dreamt of crippling you. I learned that in some situations, a thumbnail is considered huge. Well, we got through. You learned to walk again, and nurses told me I should be a nurse because I stuck to you 30 gray days and nights. Learned to change your sheets beneath you and yell at the doctor who flopped you like a piece of meat. This time you fell and tore the quadriceps I've loved apart from both your knees. The surgeon drilled 2 holes per bone, inserted tiny molly bolts, tied things up again, then stapled you together. This time you came home with your legs bound up like corpses. This time I'm all the nurse you have. This time I've learned to buy glow-in-the-dark urinals. I'm what your body has to tend your calloused feet, your sun-splotched head, and all the tender animal between. I love you just enough for this. I love you just enough to learn the use of kitty litter in commodes, or dry your back, turn your pillows, keep your water full of ice. Just enough to fret about the bald spot some drug is giving me, and whether boobs my cancer left uneven still call you. I love you just enough to worry that my face is rumpled as our sheets. Love you just enough that even though I couldn't know to worship you with my body meant watching you tremble as you reach out for the walker, rock yourself up, head into my shoulder, and practice walking all over again. This is where it matters that I do not fall. I'd still walk down the aisle, but by God, I'm glad I didn't know. Thank you.
All right. When we talked about this event, I didn't think through the implications. I'm still muted. Can you hear me? When we talked about this event, I didn't think through the implications of the fact that I'd be reading after Devon. So that's no good. Yeah, this is a dream for me, really. I don't know if you can see me. Can people see me? I can't see me, which is weird, but I'm fine with it. So I'm going to read another poem now that we're in the end of Act 3. And guys, that was just amazing. It was so powerful. I'm going to try to move us to another poem before we get to Act 2. And this is another poem from Where the Wolf. The poems in this book feel like they're in conversation with the ones we just heard, especially these ones about lost girls and family. They try to make mystic and spiritual and narrative sense of what I think of in families as threshold moments, moments of adolescence or middle age. And so this next one is another girl poem, another adolescent poem, and it's called Mourning. The angel of the black bowl sets it on the table. The girl sits down. She will not eat. She wears a dress the color of her mother's hunger. She does not believe in breakfast, dreams the eggs' songs dead in their shells. The room won't be her balloon, regretting the sky. The clock turns its face away. The chandelier above her kicks light into the past, that time when she knew how to be born. The bowl won't be her cradle. She looks into the black bowl and sees a vicious wing. She looks into the black bowl and sparrows are folding their wet brown papers. She looks in and forgets there are ways to eat and be a breath, a daughter. The girl bows her head for a blessing. Inside the black bowl, it begins to snow. Now I'm going to introduce our next three poets. This is so exciting. I'm going to start with our host, Katie Manning, who is a poet, editor of Whale Road Review, which if anybody hasn't read it, you need to check it out, and professor. Her books include, I'm working well with the books here, Tasty Other, winner of the Main Street Rag Poetry Book Award, and this recent chapbook, 28,065 Nights, which is an amazing, amazing collection. She is an expert at show tunes, board games, and listening and saying all the right things when everything is falling apart. Her poems are tender, disarming, and strong, and her empathy is unparalleled. Katie is so giving that if you don't sign up for a Secret Santa, she will secretly hunt down your wishes and send you gifts anyway, and they will be the things you have always wanted, so watch out. Our next reader will be Kimbol Soques, who is a poet and scholar of theopoetics, who's just received her Master of Divinity from Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Theopoetics, y'all. I mean, I didn't even know what it was. Awesome. The first time I saw Kimbol, she got up at an open mic and read a poem about Isaiah. I didn't even know her yet, so Kimbol doesn't really know this story, I don't think. Okay, so sorry, lost my place because of that. She was a light, and it was clear that her poems were a reckoning. I was like, I've got to meet her. We've shared workshop time and many coffee shop writing hours since, and I love her take on everything. And what she does with form, you're going to see it. I'm so excited. Oh, I went this backwards. So she's going to go third. Before her will go Sarah Ann Winn. I knew I was going to do that, guys. I'm so sorry. Second is Sarah Ann Winn. I have the books in the wrong order too. Who's the author of Alma Almanac, winner of the Doe Overstreet Press Prize, and many wonderful chapbooks, including Ever After the End Matter from Pork Belly Press, which is of note to those fairy tale fans present. Sarah's poems are inventive and compelling. She's a free-range librarian and fashioner of the most amazing prompts, who shares her enthusiasm for Anne of Green Gables and TARDISes and the visual arts, in short, all the best things in the world. So we'll start with Katie. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. It's such an honor to get to share the glow of your book celebration and read a poem with you. So I am going to read Choosing a Moon, because if we have a wolf, I think we have to have a moon. So this poem has an epigraph, and it is from a tweet that I saw from Todd Dillard. And it is, I think everybody in the poetry community deserves their own moon. Choosing a Moon. Who can resist the pull of Ganymede, the only moon in the solar system with its own magnetic field, named for the most beautiful boy? And don't most of us make the mistake of taking whatever is largest, a slice of cake, or most lovely, that gorgeous boy, even when we know they're not the best for us? Then I leap to the other extreme. I think of Deimos, smallest moon of Mars, the 8-mile ball I could keep in my cosmic pocket, but who wants to carry even a small amount of dread? Then I turn to Io, and my mouth keeps turning the vowels over and over. How could I resist the liquid sounds that label the driest object in our solar system? How can I help but see myself in one of the few mortal women beyond this earth? What woman doesn't contradict herself and burn? The lava lakes call to my tongue. Io, this is the one. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Katie and Sally, holy moly, thank you for bringing us together to celebrate the birth of your beautiful book. It's so universal and comforting, even in its disquiet moments, as all the best fairy tales are. Who hasn't felt at some time like a motherless child, or especially in the presence of an unknowable mother? Later, we might return to be the mother that they could not, and sometimes even to mother our own mothers, now lost in their woods. So I thought I'd write a poem of mothering a mother. We decide to adopt. We are told, do not wait for infants. Consider sibling groups. This could take quite some time. Think older, long without family. Finally, we're matched with Baba Yaga. For her, we plant thorny raspberries, a home hedge. We discuss retainers to pacify her bear-trapped teeth. Anger's her only defense. Late at night, we search ads on Craigslist, gloat over a Fisher Price built on chicken legs, tuck flying mortal and pestle in to be used indoors from now on. She dreams of the pets who betrayed her, fierce chases. She fevers them out. We turn on the nightlight, fit into her arm crook a handmade hand-me-down doll to help her rest easy, to help her call me mother.
Thank you so much, Sally, for inviting me to be part of this group. It has been more than a little overwhelming to get to hear the glory of these works of my friends, and particularly hearing you speak your poems aloud. My part with Sally, what always comes back to me, and I think comes through her writing as well, is what a generous eye and heart she has. Working with her in workshopping poetry, I'm always looking again at my own work and saying, oh, I didn't notice all those things that happened there. Whereas when I'm reading Sally's, I'm like, clearly, this is masterful work. And I am, just left in her wake. So for this reading, I wanted to find something a little longer of mine, but something that also tried to mess around with images that we might find a little bit familiar, but a little bit not. This is actually ekphrastic. I didn't tuck the photo in with it, but there is an actual angel somewhere out there that looks like this. Stone Angel 20181002. The developed grades of black through white pull me. I want to celebrate the vertical stance, squared shoulders draped in a pinafore of samite, until I'm distracted with fairy butter wings, too round to carry the tremendous weight of the proffered magnolia blossom basin, deep enough to splash up my forearms, were I at scale. The untroubled gaze, petal shaded, gives a turn. No deep right is possible, face averted. In offering, sight aligns with gift. A side stoop holds no blessing for birds or angels unaware. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Stone angels and Baba Yaga and moons. This is a dream reading for me, let me tell you. Thank you all so much. I'm going to read one more poem before the next three readers. It's another fairy tale poem. I know nobody is surprised about that. And I'm shifting a little bit from wolves to foxes, but I think that's okay. It's in two short parts, and it's another one that I actually workshopped at the Glen. It's called I Tell What Kind of Girl. 1. There was a girl once sewn into an elm. She thought a fox set her there. Softened against the stitches, she tamed their cries by hand. But this girl wed her bones to desire. Her longing sang, soured through heartwood. And then her hurt burned her through, broke from buds and flooded the fields in all her white wings. It must have been good. 2. There was another girl trapped in a tooth. She rose and fell in the wind's cool mouth. She was afraid to invent a body she could leave, so she stayed there, and the wind held her. In mutual dread, they sang, they circled the meadow. She believed she needed a fox's heat to find her skin, to open a white door and let her down into the grass. But none could come inside, where the walls were December smooth and cold. It wasn't like ice. It wasn't like anything you know. Through the white door, she could hear the pinched hearts of asphodel, and then it opened like mercy, like a breath, when she began to tell. Thank you. Now we're on to our final three readers, who I'll introduce now. Karin Bjork Kubin is a poet, professor, and musician, and the best person in the world to sneak away with from a conference for hummus and real talk about poem projects and dreams and parenting and creating a life around what really matters. She's just completed a master's in lit from Truman State, and I had the enormous privilege of reading her creative thesis, a novel in poems that engages folklore and social justice issues in innovative and profoundly moving ways. She's a courageous person, a generous friend, and her poems knock my socks off. Next, we'll hear from Nadine Ellsworth-Moran, who is a poet and pastor and a fellow native North Carolinian. Shout out to NC. We've taken workshops together, both at the Glen and more recently online. The poem she's going to read today, spoilers, she began drafting at that last workshop, and it went on to win the second place in the Makers and Mystics 2020 Bright Wings contest. This poem is daring. I'm sorry, Nadine, I'm giving things away. It takes God to Costco, guys. It's such a powerful example of Nadine's vision and voice, a mix of mystic and grounded, and the end takes my breath away. And lastly, we'll be hearing from Julie L. Moore. Her latest book of poems, let's see, here we go, is Full Worm Moon from Cascade Books. And gosh, what a powerful book it is. Julie, those moons, oh my goodness. Julie is a generous soul. I remember before we'd met in person, messaging with her about my first book contract. And she was supportive and helpful in a way that was arguably completely out of proportion to the relative stranger that I was. Well, even then, I admired the deftly lyrical and authentic way her poems bear witness and express acts of faith and wonder. So we'll start with Karin.
Thank you so much, Sally. I know everybody else has spoken about your generosity, but I want to echo that. Just what a generous and beautiful soul you have. And it's such, losing my voice, it's such an honor to be included among all these amazing people who I have such deep respect for as people and as poets. So thank you. So I'm adding an to the wolf and the moons and the stone angels. This is from the manuscript that Sally mentioned that I finished this spring. What she didn't say is that she sort of helped me over the finish line in March when I was sort of not sure that I could finish this. And I sent it to her and she read it and gave me the encouragement that I needed to carry it to the end. And I appreciate that so much. This poem is part of a series of poems telling the story of a man who is married to a shapeshifter. And it's not something that he knows at first when he gets married, but kind of figures it out, kind of like in a regular marriage, I guess, in all marriages. So this is just one of the forms that she takes and his response to that as he's trying to figure out who and how he loves. When she was an owl, she would disappear into the trees, arced wings and silence slicing the night, eyes dark and wide. He left the window open. He listened for her feet on the sill. He learned the exact pitch of her call. He learned to make pens from the feathers she dropped, learned that the hard part was writing with them, working with the nib, not against. Learned how not to splatter, and which motions left dark blots that soaked through the paper onto the oak desktop. He learned the shape of each stain, how it was an island in a sea of burl. He learned the feathers around her eyes. He tried to map their intricacies, but always he was drawn back to their centers, dark islands, dark seas. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's hard not to repeat a lot of what has been said about Sally, but we met at the Glen, and I remember just loving the way she thought and the kindness she held in that space, and just such a beautiful person that I wanted to get to know. And I was really fortunate that we ended up in the same workshop online, which was a godsend during the past year or so, and just grateful for her friendship and encouragement. And I really don't know that I offered Sally a whole lot that was useful to her in her poems, because I would read her poems and go, well, I don't know how you can make that better, but you know, it's pretty good. So I'm delighted to be here and to share in this time. This is a bit of a long poem. I asked Sally if that was okay, but thanks, Sally. So I'll just begin. A Thursday with God. It takes a while to agree on the day. We each claim unwieldy schedules. I concede he may be busier, so I let him choose. We meet at a 7-Eleven for hazelnut coffee, mine with artificial creamer, his black, uncomplicated. On a bench outside, we sit by the pumps where gas shimmers in traces of old rain. He insists we take turns selecting our activities. We flip our empty cups up. I go first. I try to think where he'd like to go, but it's like buying a gift for someone who has everything. I panic, and we end up at Costco, wandering aisles of overabundance. I regret my choice, but it's marvelous, he says, as he lifts a variety pack of cured German meats and a 5-pound block of cheddar. He suggests we arrange a picnic. I imagine a feeding the 5,000 scenario, maybe a homeless shelter or prison yard, and scrunch my eyes shut, ready for a miracle. An empty coast, just some scrubby brush and tall grasses. He must have dropped off the food while I wasn't looking. I give him a quizzical glance. Wait for it, he says, as he pulls a hunk of leftover cheese from his coat pocket, offers me a piece. Then they come, Chincoteague ponies at full gallop. I love that sound, don't you? The vibration chatters incomprehensible words to my bones. We're outside a white clapboard house with green shutters, a well pump with a bronze placard around back. Helen Keller lived here, I tell him, but I suspect he knows. We look at the museum photos kept behind glass, our heads bent together. It must have been hard, her life, I mean. It was, he offers, without elaboration. My tongue jumps with questions, yet I let the moment pass. Want to see something really cool? My mind reels. It's so humid, my glasses fog. Is this a greenhouse? Come on, I think, not even the Amazon forest. Look here, he points to a plant with densely packed leaves. Yeah, it's nice. I see his head shake ever so slightly. No, here. He runs his finger along the vein. That color, it doesn't have a name. Want to give it a go? I take a picture with my iPhone and ask if I can think about it. He looks disappointed. I try harder with my next pick and concentrate on the great cathedrals, flying buttresses, gold leaf and stone arches, humanity's display of adoration. He smiles politely as I point out ornate statuary and stained glass. He climbs into the crow's nest pulpit and looks over empty pews. I hear a low sigh. What? I ask. Don't you enjoy our worship? Yes, I do, he says. But these walls feel tight, and he moves toward the exit. I'm a little annoyed. The sign reads 2013 Best Small Library in America, Lost Creek, West Virginia. Now, where is he? Of course, running from table to table, collecting stubby yellow pencils. He lays them in front of me and grins. We methodically sharpen each one. I use the electric sharpener while he turns a crank model. He seems entranced by each perfect point. We replace them in their respective cups and walk out past a befuddled librarian. Is it still my turn? He asks, because we're sort of in the neighborhood already. We walk past burn barrels, old tires, a ruffled orange tabby sunning on a broken down car. The welcome mat says, go away, but he knocks on the screen frame. Paint flakes and drifts to our feet. What are we doing? I ask impatiently. This won't take long, he says, just an old friend I'd like to see. I feel a growl turning over in my stomach and pull my sweater tight. Owlet moths flit around the weak porch light. We stand. Amped up truck mufflers and cursing rise and fade. We stand. I shift from leg to leg. It seems rude to sit if he doesn't. We stand. His turn feels endless now. I'm beginning to think this is how he spends most of his days. Thank you.
I had to unmute myself. I'm so enraptured by that, Nadine. That was amazing. I first met Sally, I don't know how many years ago, but you're right, Sally, we first met online. So we kind of found each other through that WAMPO listserv, I think, the Women Poets listserv, which I think still maybe exists, but may have gone the way of the dinosaur, I don't know. And then quickly came to Facebook, and then things took off from there. And I remember you, I think you reached out to me and you said, I was the, I think you were the runner-up for the Ruminate Prize. And I had actually won the contest that year. And to date, it's like still, I think, the only contest I've ever won. So it's like, it has this miraculous little, aura around it in my memory. And that's how we struck up conversation. I told you how much I loved your poem. And then we started following each other's publications, and fast forward through time, you were helping me with some poems and some feedback, and it came time for my book, Particular Scandals, as I was putting that together way back in 2011, I think. And I contacted you and I said, Sally, I loved your book. I think No Eden came out first. Is that right? And I was like, how do you organize a book? Like, I did my first one, but I had all these regrets about the first one, like many writers do. And you were like, well, I'll take a look at it. So I sent you the whole manuscript, and I still, to this day, I owe you for that book because you rearranged everything. And you're like, it needs 3 sections. I'm feeling it in 3 sections, and then arrange it this way. And you taught me so much, because you taught me, look, don't just think about arranging poems by imagery or by theme, but think in terms of tone and think in terms of voice. And so I learned a lot from you for that. So we still didn't meet until we finally ended up at the Glen workshop together before, like right before the pandemic, right? Like 3 years maybe before the pandemic, something like that. So we'd known each other basically like an entire decade before we finally saw each other in the flesh. And what I love about your work and continue to love about this new book is just that, yes, you can weave myth with your real life and the suffering that you've endured in your life and the beauty of your life and the endurance of that suffering in your life and your love for, humanity, even those humans who have hurt you, and how this all comes through in the gorgeous imagery everyone keeps remarking about in your work. And so every time I read your poems, I think, how does she do that? I want to write like that, but I can't write like that. So this summer I was in an online workshop with Carolyn Forche, and the first prompt she gave us was write an autobiographical poem. And I was so disappointed. I was like, that is so boring. Who would want to read an autobiographical poem that I write? Well, I started, because a lot of my poems come from juxtaposition and pushing back and just being the contrary old grump I can be. I started thinking, Well, if I were to write a book like Sally's, I would have to write about how I'm such a failure at mysticism because I so want to be a mystic and want everyone to think I'm this mystical person, but I'm not, you know, I'm just this kid from New Jersey. And so suddenly this prompt that I was, you know, grumbling about from Carolyn Forche became the poem I'm reading today. So it's called Mystic Failure. What mystic can come from South Jersey, where I was born in the 1960s, the same day a circus clown was slain? Concrete realities have always intervened between me and prophecy. I spent my summers at the shore, buying trinkets on the boardwalk, eating my mother's pancakes and scrapple, when we'd arrive home encrusted in sand, smoldering from too much time in the sun. I've tried to be a mystic, believe me. When we were in the midst of a move, my sister, brother, and I slept at our grandmother's Delran apartment, where one night I dreamt I saw a man at the sliding glass door, ready to rob the place. And then my brother's shout woke us all up to, yes, find a man at the glass, peering in. I tried to sell it as ESP, but my family, scientists all, just said I saw him first when half asleep, then translated him into apparition. I tried some more in the Poconos, where we'd travel to see my greats, Uncle Herb and Granddad George, and I'd wander off to the meadow's edge, stroll into the hollow where milkweed and white asters, Jack in the Pulpit and Solomon's Seal, broom sedge and bee balm and black-eyed Susans congregated before my eyes, and my first poems rose in my throat. But I spoke no predictions or keen perceptions, contacted no spirit inhabiting the woods beyond the bite of burrs. I couldn't even foresee the Phillies World Series win in '80. I kept trying later on to extract from my senses ecstasies in prayer or visions in the Garden State, but had to settle for bike rides through town and Bible studies at church at my rich friend's house. Every now and then, a hymn or psalm could inspire me to reach for something beyond the pew or podium, but then my friend would pinch me during prayer, her fingernails reminders to be practical, like the choice of a career. Mystic just never entered into it. Such were the suburbs I grew up in, with my stay-at-home mom who read me books and marched with my father in DC demanding victory in Vietnam. And oh, my political father, who joined the John Birch Society and took me to canvass neighborhoods for Schmitz for president in '72. Everyone was a communist to him, including Nixon. And when everything's a harbinger of dangers to come, nothing is prophetic. That day, no sign foretold that a German shepherd would lunge at me, barking madly behind his fence and scare me to death. My subsequent scream spurring my dad to run, then comfort me. What room was there for mystery amid such certainty powered by the long drawn out Red Scare and its gory corpses? What room for ethereal signs when my body began its betrayals, my first surgery at 10, followed again and again by more and more? I was just trying to stay alive. Besides, I worship my dad who held my hand through all the pain and vomit, all the fear, who told me without hesitation that he loved me. He was enough back then. And so was mom, a proud softball pitching lefty who taught Sunday school to kids with flannel graphs about Moses and Noah, men who took their orders straight from God, whose voice, was it too much to ask, I wished I could also hear instead of Philly accents ringing in my ears.
Wow. Thank you all so much. This is amazing. I said it already, but it's a dream fulfilled. So thank you, Karin and Nadine and Julie. I think I'm going to finish us off with a short poem from the end of Where the Wolf, and also in its way a parent poem. This one's called Mast Year. And a mast year is a year when there are an inordinate number of acorns. So it's a good year to be a squirrel. My mother has dementia, and during the shutdown, we spent a lot of time on the phone together talking about what was outside her window. So I know for sure that she remembers a lot about nature and trees and birds. And so that is what we focused on. One of the heartbreaks about dementia is that sometimes a person will remember even small things that they learned long ago about, different types of shrubs and what kinds of birds build different nests, but they don't necessarily remember other things such as who their children are. So this is a poem that reckons with that, and it's the last one. And I want to thank everybody again so much for being here and hearing these wonderful poets read. Mast year. Now that my mother forgets me, I will stop being born. Instead, I'll tear from pine bark skin and end curled in this wood, where it is always brown leaf and piano dusk, where foxes wait to nudge my soft crown. In a mast year, wood seeds fill the velvets of old trunks, where moss sweetens them in sleep. The foxes, also dreaming, judder their nut brown lids. I will not be my mother's doll or cradle, and will be theirs, red-furred for keening, until the branches teach me to creak. It's their story I'll tell if I ever speak. My mother still knows what a mast year is, remembers red oak stones she once called the color of our hair. Surfeit, brim dream, glut, blood night acorns tick and swell, don't need a future, but I will still know her, no matter how full I am of their dark fruit, how far from her twilight tongue. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. And thank everyone for coming today. Thank you to all of the readers, and thank you especially to Sally for sharing your work, for writing it in the first place, and for allowing all of us to celebrate you and your wonderful book today. This is just such a gift, and it's so good to be together. Many of us will want to stay and visit with each other, so please feel free to stick around. I'm going to stop the recording, and then Sally wanted to take a screenshot with as many of you who are willing. So if you'd like to stick around and take a group
if you can stay
photo. Yeah, we'll do that. So I'll stop the recording, and then we can do the wild after party. So thank you.